Welcome to the Mystery College Podcast. This is Jake Sen, and today we're interviewing Denny Sargent. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's very nice of you.
Yeah, and so you've authored well over a dozen books. You have an online course about higher guardian angels. You have tons of material, lectures, and you've been on lots of podcasts before. So I'm curious about what got you started on the path to magic, meditation, self-exploration of the consciousness?
Well, wow, that goes way back. Okay, so I'd start by saying if anybody wants to know about me, they can go to my I guess it's website and blog. You can get to it with werewolfmagic.com with magic with a K, or now it's feralmagic.com. Both of those go to my website. So that is lists all my books and everything, and also links and tons of my stuff. I just posted two things yesterday. I did a presentation on shamanism, and I led all the people in this group. It was for a Winter Star, which is in Ohio. I led them on two different ritual extravaganzas. And those are both on my webpage. So anytime I present, I put my stuff on my webpage if people are curious to see what I do. So I got into the occult when I was 14 years old in New York City. I knew I was a pagan, like when I was 12, 13. I knew I was my parents made me go to church. It didn't make any sense to me. I knew I loved nature and I loved animals, and I knew I was a pagan. And I read all the books on mythology, and I said, okay, yeah, I believe in lots of gods, not one. And the God they have is not very nice. And this was long ago. There was no internet, and I picked up a magazine that had like psychic New Age stuff in it, and there was a little ad from somebody that said, "Teenage pagan looking for other teenage friends," and I wrote the person. His name was Robert, and he was in New York, and I was living right outside of New York City. And we ended up becoming best friends, and I would go into New York and he'd come out and visit. And mostly I ended up living in New York because my parents were, they were problematic on a few levels. But anyway, so I got initiated into witchcraft when I was 14. This was the 70s. So the rules were really different. Everything was different. And it was also New York, which meant it was gritty and dirty, and there were mass murders constantly. And it was actually the best ever. But I don't know how to explain that in a way that doesn't sound weird. New York in the 70s was so much fun. Anyway, so Robert was already at the Magical Child, which was the only really occult store in New York City, and sort of the epicenter of the occult revival. And like he had Barden's books, he had everything, but the only other place to buy books or things was Weiser's had a store that wasn't far away. At first it was called the Warlock Shop, and then all the witches told him, no, you shouldn't call it that. So then it became the Magical Child. But so there was like a group of us who were all teenagers who were all obsessed with occult stuff. So I don't know what that means, some sort of karmic thing. And we all became really good friends. And we hung out upstairs in the Magical Child, smoking dope and making trouble. And my friend Robert worked at the store, which was illegal because he was 15, but he did anyway. He took all his money in occult books. So we ended up having the best occult library of anybody I've ever seen ever. He had everything, like literally everything you can think of. He had every book by Barden. He had every book by Oakville. He had every book by Crowley. He had everything. So we all hung out at his house, and we hung out there. And several of us said, look, we went to the Eddie and Herman and Eddie Buzinski, who were gay and running covens. But there were high priestesses too. It was New York. It was New York in the 70s. And we said, look, we want to be initiated into Welsh traditional, which we want to be. We had friends who were already young who were running a coven, And they said, "Oh, no, you're too young." And we said, "No, that, she's young and he's older. And the only reason you let him, so eventually they made us get letters of permission from our parents, which made no sense and was not legal at all. But it was the 70s. They didn't know what to do. They were like, "All right, well, you have to go get a letter of permission from your parents." And I was like, "All right." And my parents were like, "What?" And anyway, so I ended up being a witch and a pagan, went through pagan way, lost my virginity at Church of the Eternals, at Church of All Worlds, which I don't know if you've heard of that, but so I was involved in all the pagan cults, like you name it. And let's see. So then we discovered Crowley and the Book of the Law and everything else. And then I became a Thalemite as well. And we had our own, our little circle, our little group pulled away from the witchcraft, and we created our own magical group called the Grove of the Star and the Snake, because we wanted to do ceremonial magic, and we wanted to do it our way. So we had all these books. I mean, like we had Bard, we had everything. So we did our own rituals, and we created our own thing, and we did serious occult work, and had some amazing experiences. And then we published our own magazine called Mandragore, and this was in the 70s and early 80s. And we were doing stuff nobody else was doing, because we just did what we wanted to do. And so I moved into that. And then in 1980, two of the people in our group went to England and received tantric initiation through a lineage called the Adinath Sampradaya, the Adinath lineage. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. And that it had come from Sri Gurudev Dadaji Mahendranath, and then it got people in England had gone there and studied and hung out there, and they received the initiation. And then my friends went to England and they received the initiations, and they brought it to New York, and then I received initiation. So I've been an initiated tantric since 1980, and that's my nightly meditation, my nightly ritual is I do a tantric puja, a tantric ritual, and meditate and all that sort of thing. But I do a lot of things. In the 1970s, late 70s, when we were doing magical work, we connected with a woman named Nima. Have you ever heard of her? She wrote a book called Ma'at Magic. Have you seen that? No. Okay. Ma'at Magic was very, very popular, and she was a ceremonial magician. She was a Thalemite. She was into Crowley. She was into everything. But she had an extremely intense visionary thing that happened where she was connected. She was contacted by the goddess Ma'at. And it's hard to explain in a quick, I don't know how to say it, but she was a Thalemite. She was interested in Horus and the whole Book of the Law and all that sort of thing. But Ma'at had come and basically communicated to her and channeled all this stuff about the goddess Ma'at being the goddess of truth. And I don't know if you know this, but in a lot of ceremonial magical like sort of sequences that people believe, sort of, how do I explain that the earth, the world is shifts by age, right? So like the Greeks believed in like different ages. There's still a belief system that we go from one phase to another as we evolve, right? And Crowley pointed out that, and he referred to the age we're in now as the age of Horus, force and fire, and everything's going to go to hell. The next age is supposed to be the age of Ma'at, which is the age of truth and balance and justice, and where things come back around to, anyway, this is what came through Nima. So she had some magazines called the Cincinnati Journal of Ceremonial Magic, not the greatest title for a cult magazine, and we, at this point, we were hooked into the magical child. So every single book and magazine that was in the world at that time, we had, because there just wasn't that much, and everything was sort of exploding in the 70s and 80s. So we hooked up with her, and remember, there was no internet. So we were writing letters, like tons of letters back and forth. And I still have piles of them. And we started doing work with her. And then we all drove to Ohio, which is where she lived, with her daughters on a farm, which was really a shift from where we were in New York. And we had been working with her magical techniques and had incredibly powerful results, and started working with Ma'at and having incredibly powerful results. And so we went there and met with her and had this incredible fusion. When we all got together, there was this incredible like explosion of magical energy. It's very hard to describe. And we ended up doing nonstop ritual magic for like 5 days. They culminated in the creation of a new magical order called the Horus Ma'at Lodge. And you're more than happy to go online and look for it. It's called the Horus Ma'at Lodge. And that was founded in 1979. And she was more or less the head of it for many, many years. And then she passed away, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago. And I was running it for a period of time, and I don't like hierarchical systems. We are loosely thelemic, but we're not like OTO or any of that. We are open to everybody. So we have people from any kind of occult area you can think of in our group. The thing that we mostly think about is about mod and truth and balance, and there's nothing wrong at all about that. So I think I've covered most of the occult things I've done. Well, I haven't talked about werewolf magic, but that's a whole sidebar. Do you have any other questions? I can talk for a long time about occultism. So
yeah, that's a fascinating background, and it's taking me back to a time where I didn't even exist.
Yeah, I'm getting to the point where a lot of the people I hang out with, I hang out with mostly younger people. I don't particularly care for. I don't work a lot with people my age. I have a very different mindset, I think. So I hang out with a lot of younger people, and I have to occasionally, let them know, like, no, I don't. Yeah, no, there was no internet then.
It's a really helpful reminder. Like it's sometimes there's a part of me that slips those things in.
So people are like,
anachronistic insertions.
People are like, so what do you have online that Nima sent you? And I'm like, I have handwritten letters, and people just look at me like I'm completely out of my mind. Like, what? People wrote letters? I'm like, I wrote my master's degree on an IBM Selectric. I mean, like people bitch and moan to me, university people bitch and moan to me about like, oh, it's, this MS Word is such a pain in the ass. And I'm like, don't, screw you, just forget it. I had to like, anyway, yeah, that was my MA was in ancient history. I went to Western, by the way. I don't know. So that's where I got my master's. Upstate New York, but for BA, but master's. I loved Western. So where do you live now?
Yeah, right now I'm in San Diego.
Oh,
yeah, I used to be in up in the Pacific Northwest, like yourself. It's funny we never crossed paths though, because I didn't.
I'm not particularly. I don't think I'm particularly well known in Seattle. I mean, I have a lot of occult friends, but most people are very shocked when they meet me, because they're like, well, you've been here. How long have you been here? I said, well, I moved here in 70. I moved to Washington in 79, and I've been in Seattle since 84. And they're like, well, how come I don't know you? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm not. I don't know what's the word. I'm not famous, I guess. I don't know. I don't run a cult. So, well, I had a werewolf cult for a period of time, but that's pretty new.
That's pretty niche. But I want to dig on that a little bit. Like, that's pretty cool. Like, is he had like a werewolf magic practice group?
Yeah, yeah.
Did
So,
that ever expand into like from werewolf to feral or like general animism?
uh, well, do you have my werewolf magic book?
I don't.
Oh, oh, oh. If you want, I'll send you PDFs. Just don't tell Llewellyn. But
Right.
no, you should read the werewolf magic book because people. Uh, I'm a serious occultist. I publish my stuff a lot. I just don't go around talking. I don't go around bragging. I don't teach a lot of it. But um, so I don't like to like people see my werewolf magic book and they're like, oh, werewolf magic, and I'm just like, okay, we're done. In a couple of just short sentences, what happened to me was I had a really horrible divorce and I lost my job. Um, I lost everything. I was in really bad shape, and I was living in an apartment after having my own house and losing the house and losing my pottery studio and everything in the divorce, and continued meditating, but was in a very very deeply depressed state and not doing well. And well, I was doing my tantric meditation, and in the middle of a meditation, I'm closing my eyes and I've created a safe space. I create a circle and the whole thing like most people do. And this wolf uh, showed up in my meditation, and I just thought, okay, I'm losing my mind, and I just ignored it. And I banished thoroughly, and then it kept coming back, and I finally like with my eyes closed, I'm looking at it, and it was as clear as can be. And I said, "What are you?" And it cocked its head, and it just communicated to me, non-verbally, um, you've been calling me. Like I thought it was going to say motherfucker, but it didn't. You've been calling me, and I said, and I was like, what? It said, look. The guy's like, look, you're losing it. You're about to crack, and I'm coming to help you. So I can help you. And I kind of ignored this for a while, but it wouldn't leave, and it just kept saying, look, I can help you, and you're being a jerk. And I said, okay, all right, fine. And I said, and, we're not talking, but we're having a communication. I've never experienced anything like this before, right? And I communicated and was, non-verbally communicating. And I said, all right, what do you want me to do? It said, well, I want you to go out into the woods. I was in an apartment that had 40 acres of woods next door. I want you to go into the woods and rip off your clothes and let out your animal. And I was like, what? But I was really at my wit's end, and I followed his advice, and I felt 100% better. And then it said, okay, now I want you to go up into the woods, up into the mountains, the Cascades, and I want you to do the same thing. And I'm thinking, wait, there's pumas, there's bears, there's, it was like, basically it was saying, look, you need to like unleash your animal self, and you need to dive into nature, and you need to just throw yourself into this and just trust. And so, all right. And I did. And I had an extremely intense experience. So I'll send you a PDF of the book, and you can read. I do this whole story there. But from then on, I had like a mentor. I had a spirit mentor, a wolf spirit mentor, which sounds so weird when I say it out loud, but it's how it was. And I would say, well, what do I do now? What do I do now? Why isn't this working? How does this work? And then it basically taught me how to do the shape shifting. And I've always liked horror movies, I like werewolf movies, but I thought this is nuts. But then I started doing research, and the wolf spirit's like, just there's been basically saying like there's been werewolf cults forever, and it's a real thing. So shut up, and So I have a master's degree in ancient history, and I didn't know, I don't know, I never ran into like werewolf cults. Well, lo and behold, the spirit was absolutely right. There have been very extensive werewolf cults for thousands of years. And in my book, I actually went through and found all this stuff, and I found Roman historians and Greek historians, and they were all like, yeah, I went to the Nurai. The Nurai was a tribe in what's today Russia. I went to this is Herodotus, a famous historian. He said, I went to visit the Nurai, and a week after I was there, the entire tribe shapeshifted into werewolves for 1 week, which is something they do every year. And this comes up again and again and again. There's different places. There's Roman Lupercalia, which we just had, was run by two priests who did this sort of secret ritual where a goat was slaughtered and a dog was killed. Earlier it had been a wolf, but there were no wolves anymore. And they were stripped down, these two men of high level, breeding of some kind. And they wore the goat skin, and they had goat skin I don't know, ropes. And they went through this whole ritual where they were anointed and initiated as werewolf, the Greek term, werewolf priests. And then they would run amok. Have you ever heard of Lupercalia?
Heard of what?
Lupercalia.
Lupercalia, no.
The festival in ancient Rome.
Hmm.
Lupercalia was a solid week of debauchery, wild sex, flagellation, incredible drinking, and God knows what else. Everyone just ran amok, basically naked or semi-naked, except the upper class thought it was horrible and hid. It was a huge thing. And these priests would run around whipping women who wanted to get pregnant. So they were basically promoting fertility in this ritual, and they were called Luperci. They were werewolves, quote unquote werewolves. They were sort of possessed by the deity, and went on to this. So this sort of thing is everywhere. I mean, I have a lot of data on it. So this was interesting, was to see, as a historian, as somebody who has a master's degree in ancient history, I was like, oh wow, this is like a thing. The earliest werewolf I've found is 40,000-year-old cave painting in Portugal, which is a hunter, this is Paleolithic, a hunter who's half wolf and half man with a spear going hunting. So there's always been this thing. There's always been these groups. Often they're male, but not always. And another one that I found that I didn't end up putting in my book was in pre-Indo-European cults that came down out of what is now Persia. They were warrior clans, and there was a term they used, and my pre-European, the earliest stuff, the earlier stuff that's explained that it's a language that doesn't exist anymore. Proto-European. I can't remember the name of it, but these warrior groups were called werewolves, and they were kind of rogue. Some of them took money from different towns to do different things. So anyway, this has been around forever. Then I found out, as moving down through history, getting through to the church and Catholicism when it took over, there were werewolf cults all throughout Europe, and especially in Scandinavia. The Vikings, of course, had berserkers, and they had bearsark, which is the people who shifted into being bears when they fought. Then which you don't hear about a lot is the ulfsark, who shifted into being werewolves, and could be stabbed and all that. They didn't feel anything. So that was a serious cult. If you want to see a really good movie about it, see The Northman. They actually show an initiation into berserkers, ulfsark and bearsark. And made me so happy. All my friends who know about my werewolf magic book made me watch it and said, look, see, it's your book. So witches in the Middle Ages, who were, of course, persecuted, 50% of them, I dug deep into I was wondering if the witchcraft, the witch, quote unquote, witches in the Middle Ages who were persecuted and destroyed by the church. I was kind of curious if they also did shapeshifting. And then, lo and behold, I found pages in the actual transcripts that about 50% of all witches who were arrested and put to death or whatever were also accused of being werewolves, which you never read that anywhere and you never see it anywhere. And I was like, wow, that's very cool. And I've even got some old images from very, 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 from like 1400s, 1500s, showing witches being burned. And some of them are werewolf witches being burned alive. So this was a real thing. My friends who are into the occult but are not interested in my werewolf cult, I give them my book and they always read the first half of the book, which is all history. And they're like, wow, that's interesting. And I said, good, well, then you should read the rituals. Yeah, no, that's not, it's a little too much for them. So that got me into it. And slowly but surely, I was doing this stuff and piecing together rituals. And I figured out, and with a lot of help from this werewolf spirit and studying, like he would guide me, like, look at this, research this, and da-da-da-da. And then I figured out a formula for shape-shifting. And the shape-shifting is more like the Northmen in the Viking era. The shape-shifting is not, you don't grow fangs and claws. I wish, that would be nice. And get hair all over your body and run amok and rip people's throats out, which occasionally would be really a great thing to do. But the trick is basically you're sort of shutting down your upper cortex and allowing the more primal brain, what Carl Sagan called the dragon brain, which is down here at the base of your skull. So I actually have it all spelled out in my book. Like I've figured it out because I'm not stupid. And I actually want to know I want there to be real function behind what I'm doing instead of, the angels come and make me a werewolf kind of thing, which I don't think that would work, but I've got it down to a science. And I have been doing workshops on it for quite a long time now. I went to Starwood. You ever heard of Starwood Festival? It's like it's probably, at this point, it's probably the biggest pagan occult gathering in the country in Ohio. And they asked me to come and do werewolf magic. And I said, sure. And just to show you that I was worried about it because I've had small groups of people, and I had a group for several years where we'd all get together on the full moon and we would rock and growl and howl and go through this whole procedure and shut down our brain and bring up our animal self and flip into being feral, flip into being an animal. And it's fantastic because you're not thinking at all. Your senses become much stronger. I don't think it's mystical. I mean, I think some of it is, but I think a lot of it is just simply knowing how to play your system and let the more primal part of your your system and your brain and all of this stuff come to the fore. And all of a sudden, like when I did this by myself, I could see at night in the woods. I mean, I snuck up on animals and I snuck up on deer and raccoons and scared the shit out of them. And I don't know. It's just it's very different. I could do things I couldn't do when I wasn't in that state of consciousness. So when I went to Starwood, I had 200 people show up at this event, and I was kind of freaked out. And I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. So I spent the first half hour or more training them on some of the stuff. Like the first thing is you can't speak English once you start going into this, because the minute you do, you basically flip everything back up into your brain again. Because I used to teach linguistics, I used to teach all this stuff. There are 6 centers in your brain. There may be more, but as of now, they know there are 6 centers in your brain that interconnect, and that's how language and reactions to language and understanding of language, that's how it happens. So the minute you start talking, and when I was doing stuff with I was doing werewolf magic stuff with people, we'd go into a trance, and then someone would say something in English, and they would be out of it. In other words, you've got to shut it down, you know? So I would teach everybody this, like Ed Starwood, I had 200 people, and I was like, all right, these are the things you can't do. This is how it works. This is how the game works. And then I taught them rocking, and I had found a lot of these techniques in books, different cults and different things, shamans. I've met Siberian shamans and hung out with them and interviewed them. I've met shamans in Guatemala. I've traveled to a lot of countries. And I got lots of information on how you would go under, how you'd go into a trance state. And so I learned some of these things and I pieced them together, rocking, swaying, and then the focus was to get into the sort of, to bring up your animal self and sort of envision it and all that in the form of a wolf, because that's what I was fixated on and what I was learning. And so rocking and swaying and growling and howling and up growling and down growling and there's a whole technique. And it took me 4 or 5 years to like try these things out on myself to see what worked, what didn't work. I was getting guidance from the wolf spirit, who half the time was like, I have no idea what you're doing, but go for it. So I had 200 people. I spent about 20 to 30 minutes walking them through everything, and then I said, okay, now I'm going to be the alpha wolf, and I'm going to tell you what to do, and then you do it. And I got all 200 of them to go under. I mean, all 200 of them went under and went insane. This is what really got to me. This is what freaked me out the most. And I tell people this. A lot of them ran around on all fours, which I didn't even know was possible, right?
No.
I can't do that. I'm older. I can't run around on all fours. No, they were loping around the circle on all fours and howling and growling. And I was like, I was in that state, and I'm looking at this and I'm going, holy, I just could hear like the wolf spirit laughing his ass off. And then I realized, wow, when you have more people, they go under faster, which is how these ancient tribes used to get the whole tribe to quote unquote shift into werewolves for a week. So it's trance state. It's a lot of these shamanic techniques. It's shutting down your upper cortex, allowing there's a kind of science behind it. But there's a bit of an occult thing too, because I mean, if you're a fan of different occult things, obviously you are. There are things that are quote unquote occult, but we all know that the word occult just means hidden. There are things that all these occultists do that trigger certain things that look miraculous, but they're not. And that's why when people start giving me grief about werewolf magic, I sit down and I tell them, very clearly, like, this is how I run it, and this is why I run it this way, and this is why it works. And after a while, people listen to me and they're like, oh, and I said, well, you should try it. No. I've hooked a few people into trying it, and they get to a point where it's working, and a lot of times they just back right out of it. It's just too weird for them. It means shutting down your brain. It means moving into a completely animal state of consciousness, and I think that freaks most people out. I think they think they're going to have an aneurysm or something. I don't know, or a stroke. I don't know what they think. And I had a group in my backyard. I have woods in my backyard, and we every full moon for several years, we would be out there howling and growling, and I have drumming and like all this stuff. and there's neighbors, and I always thought, well, shit, I'm waiting for the cops to come, and they never have. Nobody's, I know they knew, because how could you not hear, 6 people howling? But anyway, so that I don't know if that covered what you wanted to hear, but that's pretty much what I have to say about werewolf magic. Oh, and then I wrote the second book, which was Werewolf Pack Magic, and part of it was really triggered by people like the people at Starwood, the 200 people that went under, and I realized I had to write up, because I was solo when I wrote Werewolf Magic. When I started working with groups, I realized, I have to rewrite the whole script, because it's different when you're working with a lot of people. Just like any magical thing, solo magic is one thing, group magic is a whole different ballgame. So I'm just rambling. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I was curious about you studied like a pretty huge variety of different and a broad range of subjects, from Hermeticism,
Right,
to Animism, werewolf magic, feral magic,
witchcraft, tantra,
tantra.
dilemma,
Yeah.
pretty much everything I could get my hands on. I mean, I'm trying to think if there's something obscure that yeah, I'm also a voodoo sant.
Mm.
I have a mambo.
Wow.
Well, I got pulled into that too. Like I'm kind of like Alice in Wonderland. Like I had no interest in voodoo until I went to New Orleans, and because I had friends there who were running an occult bed and breakfast, which was so cool. And the guy I knew him from the Horse Mott Lodge in Ohio and other things. It's a small occult world, and I went to New Orleans, and he was a drummer for a voodoo group, and Priestess Miriam was the one she was the mambo who ran that particular voodoo group. So I went. This is when I was married, and I had my kid with me, who was young, on my shoulders, and he wasn't quite as autistic, and so we went to see him drum, and there were several drummers, and then the priestess showed up, and they were practicing for the actual ceremonies. And so they were doing the different rhythms, do different things, like is one loa, is one of the voodoo gods, and each one is different. And they're running through all the different ones and practicing. In comes Priestess Miriam, and she's like, "Oh yeah, this is nice. This is the nice." Then they get to Papa Legba, and they're doing the drum from Papa Legba, and she got possessed right then and there. And the whole room shifted, like the energy in the room went completely whack. I started perspiring heavily. It went from being like, I don't know, 50 degrees to like 100 degrees. It was it was one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced in the occult. It shifted everything as this entity entered her, and her voice changed, and she started putting lit cigars in her mouth, and there was a lot of stuff going on. So afterwards, then the drumming sort of ended, and then she came out of it, and everything changed. Everything went back to the way it was, and I was like, holy moly! I have been to lots of occult ceremonies, right? Like hundreds, and I don't think I'd ever had that experience before. So we ended up hanging out with her, and anyway, it went on from there. And then we brought her up to Seattle, and she presented, and she did the same sort of thing. Do you remember Edge of the Circle?
Oh, I love Edge of the Circle. Yeah.
All right. So you know them, you know everybody. So yeah, I've been going to them. They're my friends. And downstairs, she came and did it was supposed to be a lecture. Well, she did a lecture, and she had some drummers, and she was talking about voodoo, and she was explaining it and all that. And then she's like, okay, we're going to do a little drumming, and we're going to do some dancing. Well, the same thing happened. He went under like that. And there was maybe, I don't know, 50, 70 people there. And everybody just ended up throwing all the chairs in the corner and dancing. And she ended up doing a full voodoo ceremony. It was hilarious. So I don't know. This stuff is just wild. I'm trying to think if there's any other exciting things that happened, but so I pretty much have tried to get involved in every kind of occult thing I can.
Yeah, yeah, that's wonderful, and
Well,
it's pretty great the vastness of the things you gotten into, and also like the veracity you have towards learning and being a lifelong practitioner learner. We're getting a bit close to the end of the hour, and I understand you have got another call to hop onto. But
yeah,
I'd love if you shortly could share any upcoming books, workshops, or
yeah,
projects you're excited about.
yeah. I'm sorry. Let's see, what time is it? Oh yeah, I've got to go. So I've got one more minute. If people are interested, they can just go to my website, feralmagic.com, magic with a K. And I'm more than happy to continue this conversation with you another time if you want.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. Well, this has been really fun. I hope I haven't talked your ear off.
That was great. I loved hearing from you.
Good. Thank you. Well, that's great to get to know you. Too bad you're not up here. We could hang out and have a beer.
That would be nice. That'd be nice. Talk to you soon.
Hey, yeah, I'd love to see your podcast. So send me a link, would you?
We'll do.
Right. Take care, and send me your email. I think I have it, but send it to me again, and I'll send you a PDF of Werewolf Magic.
Perfect.
Okay. Oh, yeah.